We always base our decisions on health advice. Please tell us the truth the first time round. Please tell the truth from the first minute rather than after repeated conversations. Please tell us the truth at the beginning. You won't get in trouble. We just need you to tell us. When people withhold the truth or don't tell us what's happening, it just makes things last longer, and that's the last thing we want.
On what date specifically was the advice first provided to the Health Minister on locking down?
Well, it's not that easy, Ms Sharp. I mean, I know you haven't been the Health Minister, but when you're in the middle of a COVID crisis, I spend pretty well every day here in the health building, and we discuss these issues.
Question was put to Dr. Chant, and I think it's right that we get an answer from Dr. Chant.
Well, Dr. Chant gave her answer, and can I remind you that we have volunteered to come here. We don't acknowledge that you have the capacity to have us here. We've come here to try and assist, and we're going to give you the information you need. So. You might remember
the question was put to Dr. Chant, and if you would allow Dr. Chant to answer.
I will answer the question that I'm now talking about. Thank you. I mean, not up to you to determine who's going to answer the questions. I'm the Minister, and I'll answer it.
I've always taken pride that the New South Wales Government is honest and upfront with our citizens. Can I say I'm a person of my word?
There is an upper house call for papers due this Friday. Will you comply with that call for papers, which is to hand over the health advice that you received about when New South Wales should, or when Greater Sydney should go into lockdown?
Oh, I have no issue with all of that information being made available, but what we say to the public is exactly what we know and exactly the advice that we have.
We're not going to release crisis cabinet documents or cabinet documents to you.
Can I say I'm a person of my word?
Will the government release the health advice that has driven the decision making throughout the outbreak? The Public Accountability Committee says it was due at 3 p.m. yesterday but wasn't provided.
Oh, look, I'm not aware of those requests, but please know the New South Wales Government is extremely transparent in conveying our decisions. As soon as we get advice that we need to announce to the community, we do that. And I know there are various committees asking for various things, and I'm sure those processes will occur in due course. We're always very honest. People should look at our track record, the health advice. Health advice, based on the health advice. Please know we take advice from key experts, and obviously we also rely on the health advice. We take advice from key experts, and obviously we also rely on the health advice. What I know is that we have some of the best health experts, and not just health experts, but best advisors and contributions from the private sector, from business, contributing to the New South Wales Government's ability to make decisions. And I have full confidence in the experts we rely on, and we do rely on the best health advice and also the broader advice to make our decisions.
She would normally come up with the recommendations of whatever her public health team have advised her. That then goes into the crisis cabinet. Crisis cabinet consists of a number of ministers, but also senior public servants. When we get to her particular recommendations, and there are other things looked at as well in that aren't related to Dr. Chant.
The Premier repeatedly says that all of the decisions the government has taken has been on the basis of health advice. Yet it is apparent from the discussion we've had today that that's just one part of the matrix of information relied upon when the government has made decisions about timing of lockdowns, extension of lockdowns. Will we get some clear written advice from you, or some clear statements from the government about what other factors other than the public health advice have been taken into account in the decision making to date, and importantly in the decision making going forward?
And that's why we stand up every day, David, for an hour with the journalists who ask those questions. We've done it for more than a year. And every day we talk about the economic issues, the mental health issues, the educational issues, the transport issues, the police issues. And I'm sorry, if you haven't been listening, that is not our issue. And that's the end of today's hearing. Thank you very much.
Well, Minister, I just simply note that we repeatedly have the Premier saying that the decision is all taken in accordance with the public health advice, yet clearly there are other issues.
And we're not going to release crisis cabinet documents or cabinet documents to you. She won't be providing any documents.
Well, that's disappointing, Minister, but we will move on. Would you be able to provide the committee with information on advice that you've provided for stronger restrictions since the beginning of the lockdown, and then be able to articulate to the committee which ones of those have been implemented or not implemented?
Look, I think the Minister's indicated that we've provided a lot of that advice through crisis cabinet processes, so I'm not sure that I can specifically release those.
Yesterday, Dr. Charp made it very clear at the inquiry that a 70% vaccine threshold would need to be achieved before we see some level of easing of restrictions. Why do you keep on insisting that 50% could be enough to ease some restrictions?
Can I just say, Dr. Chant and I have been absolutely aligned on this issue.
It would be fair to say there is no support, though, is there, in the Doherty report for the lifting of restrictions once you get to that 50% target figure. Have you provided advice, or is it your opinion, that it is safe to commence lifting restrictions consistent with the Premier's statements?
I have not provided specific advice about any restrictions I would be prepared to ease. It is too premature.
Yesterday you told the inquiry that you believe in regards to the 50% vaccination rate, that perhaps when the Premier said it, she was trying to provide some hope. Do you still believe that this sort of a statement is a statement of hope, or do you believe it's a fact?
It's both.
The modelling that the New South Wales government is relying upon when it talks about potentially easing some restrictions when we get to 50% coverage of vaccinations, is that Doherty modelling or some other modelling?
Okay, look, I think it's fair to say that the Premier is trying to give a sense of hope to the community and trying to drive up also vaccinations, because once we do get to that point of about 50%, what we're thinking is that we could ease back on some restrictions, but we really just need to know a lot more. And we're taking advice, obviously, from the entire public health team on that.
Dr. Chant, the discussion about 50% vaccination rates, is that, in the discussion that you've had with the Premier, is that 50% of adults having at least one vaccination shot? Is that the 50% figure we're talking about?
I think what we're talking about is, in general terms, we know that countries have countries where the vaccination coverage is high, but can I also make the point that the vaccination coverage has to be...
Dr. Chant, it was a very, with all due respect, we have very limited time, and it's a question. Okay. The question was quite specific. Is that the 50% figure we're talking about?
Sorry, David, can I just say, Dr. Chant is very tired. She works 18 hours a day. I think you've got to let her have a little bit of license to answer the question fairly.
No, I appreciate it. I'm just trying to work out what the 50% baseline figure is. Is it 50% of adults 18 plus with at least one vaccination shot? Is that the 50%
Just
figure?
give her a go, David.
So I think at the moment the messaging is really around the fact that we do need to see those immunisation rates high. Now, clearly the Premier has used a target but the Premier is also well versed with the Doherty report and its contents and the implications. What we are doing is, at the moment, is making sure that the community accesses the vaccine, both vaccines, if they have access, and more importantly, we've got to get that vaccine into the areas that have got lower vaccination coverage. And that's because it doesn't matter if we have 50% overall coverage, but in fact, if communities have very, very low levels of coverage, it causes us problems as well. But in terms of the target, we're very much minded and following the Doherty report and understand that it's not about going back to COVID normal at a particular level. We have to progressively lift our vaccination rates, but at the moment we also have COVID cases, so we also have to adjust and respond to a changing situation.
Thank you, Dr. Chant. It would be fair to say there is no support, though, is there, in the Doherty report for the lifting of restrictions once you get to that 50% target figure?
Yesterday you told the inquiry it wasn't appropriate to question Dr. Chant's advice. Given the level of lockdown, it's 7 weeks, 5.5 million people are locked down. Do you maintain that? Do you think that people do have a right to understand better the health advice that's being given?
Absolutely. But what my concern was more that it was being exercised in a political way. The questions were loaded politically with not necessarily the logical outcome. They were drawing their own conclusions, not all of them, but some of the questions were very good, but some of them were a little challenging in that front. I guess what I would say is that Dr. Chant works very hard, extremely hard, and so does a whole public health team. And I think challenging what I would see then as her integrity in terms of her decision making was not appropriate. That's what I was really saying.
Clearly, the Delta variant behaved very differently to the other variants, and that is the case. Yeah.
Dr. Chant, that wasn't new information on the 16th of June or the 26th of June. We'd had that experience and that knowledge from the UK, in particular, from India. Surely that should have been the decision-making, fed into the decision-making on the 17th of June or the 18th of June.
Sorry, if you're challenging Dr. Chant's advice, then that's not appropriate.
No, it is. Yeah. So look, the informations were based on the best available evidence at the time. Clearly, the disease was not. They were linked. Initially, they were very linked cases, and then other controls were put in place. Clearly, the lockdown was recommended and enacted, and we did have success in bringing the cases down. It was a seeding event into Western Sydney that led to those West Hoxton, which wasn't recognised at the time. It was thought that that cluster had actually been identified very early, but there were issues around containment of that which weren't appreciated.
Please tell us the truth at the beginning. You won't get in trouble. We just need you to tell us. When people withhold the truth or don't tell us what's happening, it just makes things last longer, and that's the last thing we want.
Minister, I'm just going to ask one question to Dr. Chant. Have you provided recommendations on stronger measures than what the Minister and Government have adopted?
Can I just tell you, Dr. Chant gives a range of advice, which is discussed with the rest of the public health team and the health team here in New South Wales. And that advice then goes to the crisis cabinet. And involved in crisis cabinet is the economic issues, the mental health issues, the public health issues, the operational side. And so when you say stronger, it's like saying, oh, I want to bring a steel. Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? It just seems to me that...
Thank you, Minister. I think the context is useful.
The first speaker said this wasn't in some sort of gotcha moment. All you're trying to do is carry on like...
Minister, the context is useful. The question was directed to Dr. Chant.
Well, if you can't...
I appreciate the context, but I also note the short amount of time we have today. So I appreciate the context, and I'd now invite Dr. Chant to answer the question. Thank you, Dr. Chant. I do remind you the question was about measures that you've recommended.
Apologies. So in general terms, the broad measures would have been increasing compliance, things that reduce that mobility indicator, and also things that go to how we can better support surveillance testing, rapid diagnosis, those types of elements of the response, which would reduce the time it takes us to identify cases and can institute those public health control measures.
David, we are in the middle of a pandemic. We agreed to come for 1 hour, and you're just asking questions which are just aimed at just having a go. Can you actually bring this? You're the chairperson, and you should stick with what you agreed so Dr. Chant can get on with her work and stop carrying on like you're running for the Senate, for heaven's sake.
Please know the New South Wales Government is extremely transparent in conveying our decisions.
Minister, the Premier indicated a week ago that she'd be fully complying and working well with this committee, particularly given that Parliament is suspended and we have very limited ways to actually ask the questions. She also indicated that she would make available the health advice with which decisions are being made to this committee. We have had a letter from DPC that says it's difficult at the moment, but we'll look at the documents. Today you have said that you will not be providing any documents. Is that the case?
I won't be providing crisis cabinet documents, Ms Sharp, but I'll also say this, that this inquiry in committee, when we were asked to appear, we agreed we would. You don't have power to actually have us come here, but we came and we volunteered to do that. I actually thought it was a ridiculous proposition in the middle of a pandemic to take away the Chief Health Officer who's working 18 hours a day and sometimes longer to do what we're doing, but we've done it. And we agreed to 1 hour. That deal's been broken. So at this stage, if you have any further questions, you address those to the Premier, because we're not answering for the Premier, okay? But right now, this is a bit silly. An hour and a half in the middle of a pandemic, It'll be the first time in history that in the middle of a war, a parliamentary committee has called an inquiry to ask us, well, how did you make your decisions? We've told you what we can, we've given you the best we can, but now it's just getting a bit silly. If you've got questions to the Premier, ask the Premier, don't ask me. Okay?
We will.
Well, Minister, I can assure you the committee will continue to do its work and continue to do our job of trying to hold the government to an account. We won't have a history lesson about the way parliamentary oversight has happened in other moments of crisis, but I simply note you were wrong. And I also note that the Premier of Victoria made himself available for the better part of a day to the oversight committee there. Many people look to the level of transparency in Victoria as a higher standard than we've seen in New South Wales. So I hope that we can have a more productive exchange at a future hearing.
Good morning, everybody. Please no, 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 please no. Nobody from New South Wales is going anywhere.
Welcome to New South Wales.
Can I make this very clear? Please no, please no, please no, please no, please no, please no. There are plenty of things you can't do in New South Wales. You guys.
Welcome to New South Wales.
Read them. Early days, and I don't want to regret what I'm about to say. Jabs in arms. Those jabs in arms. Please no. Can I say, please no. Based on the health advice, no. We also have to keep it real. Please no. Please no. As predicted, the truth is in the numbers. I'm the Premier, so the buck stops with me.